The pension check barely covered the property taxes. After 38 years of marriage, I found myself alone in our modest townhouse in Victoria, British Columbia, trying to figure out how to stretch a retired teacher's savings that suddenly felt impossibly thin. My husband Harold had handled all our finances, and when he passed from a heart attack last March, I discovered we had far less than I'd imagined. I was 66 years old, and for the first time since I was 23, I needed to find work. That's how I ended up taking a part-time position at the Fairfield Branch Library, Tuesday through Saturday evenings, helping with the closing shift. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept me busy. Kept my mind from wandering to the empty recliner in the living room where Harold used to read his newspapers. The shift ended at 9 o'clock, and I'd catch the number 7 bus home, arriving at my stop on Moss Street just before 9:30. The first time I climbed onto that evening bus, I almost didn't notice the driver. He was perhaps in his late 50s, with salt and pepper hair and tired eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. But he nodded at me as I tapped my compass card and said, "Evening, ma'am. Careful on the steps there." Something in his voice made me pause. It wasn't just polite. It was genuinely kind. "Thank you," I said, meaning it more than he could know. His name was Derek, I learned over the following weeks. Derek Okonkwo. He'd been driving the Victoria Regional Transit for 11 years, ever since he'd lost his accounting job during the 2008 recession. Started as a temporary thing, he told me one rainy October evening when I was the only passenger. 11 years of temporary. I understood that. Life had a way of making temporary things permanent, and permanent things temporary. We fell into a comfortable routine. Every Tuesday through Saturday, I'd climb onto the number 7 at the Fairfield stop, and Derek would already have the heat turned up a little higher because he'd noticed I always rubbed my hands together when I got on. We'd talk during the 12-minute ride to Moss Street. Nothing deep at first, just the weather, the Canucks' losing streak, how our days had been. But gradually, week by week, the conversations deepened. I learned that Derek's wife had left him 8 years ago, taking their son Malcolm to Toronto. She said I wasn't ambitious enough, he told me one November night, his voice carrying that particular weight of old pain. Said she wanted more for Malcolm than a bus driver's son. "That's not fair," I said quietly. He shrugged, but I saw his hands tighten on the steering wheel. Malcolm's 26 now. Works in finance, doing well for himself. We talked on the phone last Christmas, 15 minutes. He paused. That was good, better than nothing. Without thinking, I reached forward and squeezed his shoulder. He'll come around. Sons always need their fathers eventually. Derek cleared his throat. That's kind of you to say, Mrs. Chen. Maggie, I corrected. My name is Maggie. After that, something shifted between us. I started bringing him tea. Just a simple thermos of Earl Grey from the library's break room, still hot when his bus pulled up to my stop. The first time I handed it to him through the gap beside his seat, he stared at it like I'd given him something precious. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "I know," I replied, "but you drive this route 6 nights a week, and it's getting cold out there. I figured you could use something warm." The following Tuesday, I brought homemade shortbread. The Tuesday after that, butter tarts. My late husband used to say my baking could solve any problem, and while that wasn't true, it was nice to have someone to bake for again. "My mother used to make these," Derek said one night, holding up a butter tart, back in Lagos, before we moved to Canada. She'd use palm sugar instead of maple syrup, but the taste— He closed his eyes briefly. The taste was similar. "Tell me about her," I said, and he did. He told me about growing up in Nigeria, about immigrating to Winnipeg when he was 12, about his mother working 3 jobs to put him through university. He told me about the accounting career he'd loved and lost, about his ex-wife Karen, about the son who called him once a year if he was lucky. In return, I told him about Harold, about 41 years of teaching high school English, about never having children of my own, about learning to live alone in a house full of memories, about my sister Linda in Kelowna who called every Sunday but was too busy with her grandchildren to visit. "You're a good person, Maggie," Derek said one night in late November, pulling up to my stop. "I want you to know that." I felt tears prick my eyes. "So are you, Derek." December arrived with unusual cold for Victoria, frost coating my small front garden in the mornings. The library decorated for the holidays, tinsel and fairy lights that made the old building feel almost magical. I brought Derek hot chocolate instead of tea, with a candy cane tucked into the lid. "My mother would have liked you," he said softly, warming his hands on the thermos. "She believed in small kindnesses, said they were the threads that held the world together." "Smart woman," I replied. "She raised a good son." It was a Thursday night, December 12th, when everything changed. Derek picked me up as usual, but something was different. His hands gripped the steering wheel too tight, and he kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, not in his usual friendly way, but with an intensity that made my stomach clench. "Maggie," he said as he pulled away from the library stop, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly." My throat went dry. "What is it?" "Your neighbor, the man who lives 2 houses down from you, gray siding, blue Honda in the driveway. Do you know him?" I blinked, completely blindsided by the question. "Victor Pratt?" "Not really. He moved in about 8 months ago. We wave when we see each other. He helped me carry groceries once, but we've never had a real conversation. Why?" Derek didn't answer immediately. He turned left on Cook Street instead of right, heading away from Moss Street. "Derek, where are we going?" "Somewhere we can talk." His voice was tight. "Maggie, I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you." Fear spiked through me. "You're scaring me." "I know. I'm sorry. But you need to hear this." He pulled into the empty parking lot of a closed Thrifty Foods, put the bus in park, and turned to face me fully. In the harsh glow of the lot's security lights, his face looked haggard, older than I'd ever seen it. "I drive the late shift on weekends," Derek said. "Saturday nights, I pick up the downtown routes after the bars close. Last Saturday, around 1 in the morning, Victor Pratt got on my bus. He was drunk, very drunk, and drunk people talk. I waited, my heart hammering against my ribs. He was on his phone the whole ride, arguing with someone. At first, I tried not to listen, just doing my job, but then I heard him say your address. Your exact address, Maggie. And he was angry. "I don't understand." These were his exact words. Derek pulled out his phone, his hands shaking slightly. "I started recording after I heard your address. I keep recordings for safety, ever since a passenger made a false complaint against me 3 years ago." He pressed play. Through the phone's speaker, I heard Victor Pratt's slurred voice. "The old woman at 847 Moss is getting suspicious. She asked about the paperwork yesterday. We need to move up the timeline before she figures it out and calls her bank." The world tilted. "What?" "There's more." Derek swiped to another recording. This was from yesterday. He got on my bus again, same state, same phone call. Victor's voice again. "I've got her routine down. Library closes at 9, home by 9:30. She lives alone, no visitors except grocery delivery. I've been watching. Her husband handled all the finances," she told me herself. "She doesn't understand any of it. Easy target." Ice flooded my veins. "He's been watching my house?" "I think so. And I think there's more going on than just watching." Derek's face was grim. 2 nights ago, I finished my shift around midnight. I drove past your street on my way home. I saw him standing on your porch. Just standing there, looking through your front window. When a car came down the street, he walked away like nothing happened. My hands started trembling. But why? What have I done to him? He's always been so helpful. He offered to look over my financial documents, said he used to be a banker, and noticed I seemed overwhelmed. Derek's expression darkened. "Did you let him?" I was going to. He was coming over this Saturday. I'd gathered all my bank statements, my pension information, Harold's life insurance paperwork. I felt sick. "Oh my God. Maggie, I need you to not go home tonight. Please." "Where am I supposed to go?" "The Oak Bay Beach Hotel, a friend's place, anywhere. Just not Moss Street." He reached back and handed me a folder. "These are printouts of everything. Times, dates, transcripts of what he said. I think you need to go to the police." My hands shook as I took the folder. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I wasn't sure at first. I thought maybe I was being paranoid, reading too much into drunk rambling. But last night, Maggie, he paused, and I saw his jaw clench. Last night I found something else. What? I searched his name online. Victor Pratt doesn't exist. At least, not the Victor Pratt who lives on your street. The real Victor Pratt died in a care home in Sudbury 3 years ago. Whoever your neighbor is, he's using a dead man's identity. The tea I drunk earlier threatened to come back up. He tried your door last night, Derek continued quietly. Around 2 in the morning. I was parked down the street, watching. I saw him walk up to your house, try the handle, then use something on the lock. He was inside for about 10 minutes. I didn't see what he took, but he was carrying something when he left. Inside my house? My voice came out as a whisper. He was inside my house? The police, Derek said firmly. We go now, tonight. It's almost 10 o'clock. Maggie, this man broke into your home last night. He's been watching you for months. He's planning something for Saturday, and whatever it is, it's not good. Derek's voice rose with urgency. We need to report this now. He was right. I knew he was right. 20 minutes later, we were sitting in the Victoria Police Department. A young constable took our statement while an older detective, a woman with sharp eyes and gray-streaked hair, listened with increasing interest. I told them about moving into the neighborhood after Harold's death, about Victor Pratt's friendly helpfulness, about his offer to review my finances. Derek pulled up his recordings, played them one by one. The detective's face grew grimmer with each clip. "And you're certain about the break-in?" she asked Derek. "Yes, ma'am. I have dashcam footage too. Timestamp shows 2:14 a.m., December 11th. The detective's eyes sharpened. "You have video?" "I installed a better camera after the false complaint incident. Records continuously when the vehicle is running." He handed over a USB drive. "It's all there." I hadn't known that. This man, this bus driver I'd been bringing tea and cookies to for 3 months, had been watching over me like a guardian angel I never knew I needed. The detective plugged the USB into her laptop. We sat there in that sterile police interview room, watching grainy footage of a man in dark clothing approach my front door, work the lock with some kind of tool, and disappear inside. 10 minutes later, he emerged carrying what looked like a folder. "My documents," I breathed. "He took my documents." The detective turned to me. "Mrs. Chen, you said you'd gathered financial paperwork for your meeting with him. What exactly did that include?" "Everything." I felt the blood drain from my face. Bank statements, pension documents, Harold's life insurance policy, my social insurance card, the deed to our house. I couldn't finish. The detective exchanged a glance with the constable. "What?" I asked. "Mrs. Chen, we've been tracking a series of elder fraud cases across Greater Victoria for the past 18 months. The perpetrator, or perpetrators, target recently widowed seniors. They befriend them, gain access to their financial documents, and systematically drain their accounts while simultaneously taking out lines of credit in their names." She leaned forward. "By the time victims realize what's happened, they've lost everything. Homes, savings, pensions, everything." The room spun. "You think Victor, whoever he is, you think he's part of this?" The pattern matches exactly. Helpful neighbor, offers financial assistance, gains trust. The detective stood up abruptly. "We need to search his property. And Mrs. Chen, you're not going home tonight." Everything happened quickly after that. The detective made phone calls, waking up judges for search warrants. Another officer drove me to a hotel on Douglas Street, while Derek stayed to give additional statements. I sat in that generic hotel room, curtains drawn, unable to sleep, jumping at every sound in the hallway. My phone rang at 6 in the morning. The detective. "We found it," she said without preamble. Boxes of documents in his basement. Driver's licenses, social insurance cards, bank statements, property deeds. Over 40 victims across Vancouver Island, Mrs. Chen. Some of them lost their homes. One woman had to move in with her daughter after losing her entire retirement savings. I sat down hard on the hotel bed. Oh my God. He had a partner. The person he was talking to on those phone calls. A woman named Carol Singh who worked at a local credit union. She was processing the fraudulent applications from the inside. The detective paused. They've both been arrested. They're looking at federal charges. Wire fraud, identity theft, breaking and entering. You're safe now, Mrs. Chen. But I didn't feel safe. I felt violated, shattered. A man I'd waved to cheerfully, who'd carried my groceries and smiled so kindly, had been planning to steal everything I had left of my life with Harold. Derek picked me up from the hotel that morning. No fare, no shift. He'd taken the day off just to be there for me. We drove through Victoria in the early morning light, past the inner harbor where Harold and I used to walk on summer evenings, past the Empress Hotel where we'd had afternoon tea on our 40th anniversary. Neither of us spoke for a long time. "How did you know?" I finally asked. "How did you know to pay attention, to write it all down, to watch my house?" He was quiet for a moment, his hands steady on the wheel of his personal car, a modest gray Civic that smelled faintly of air freshener and coffee. "My mother," he said finally. "After my father died, she was alone in Winnipeg. I was already here, building my career, too busy to visit more than once a year. A man in her church started helping her with things, driving her to appointments, fixing things around the house. She thought he was sent from God." I watched his face in the reflection of the window. "He convinced her to invest her savings in some kind of business opportunity," Derek continued, his voice thick with old regret. "By the time I found out, he'd taken everything. 40 years of my parents' savings. Gone. She had to sell the house my father built with his own hands. Derek. She died 2 years later. Pneumonia, they said. But I know the truth." His grip tightened on the steering wheel. "She died of a broken heart. She died of shame. She couldn't bear to face her community after being fooled like that." Tears streamed down my face. "I wasn't paying attention," Derek said firmly. "I was too busy with my own life, my own problems. I thought she was fine because she sounded fine on the phone. And by the time I realized something was wrong, it was too late." He glanced at me briefly. "So now I pay attention. I listen when drunk people talk. I notice when someone mentions watching an elderly person, when they talk about easy targets and timelines. Because I failed my mother, Maggie. I won't fail again." "You saved my life," I whispered. "You saved mine first," he replied quietly. "You treated me like I mattered, like I was worth talking to, worth knowing. You brought me tea and asked about my day, asked about my mother, asked about my son." He shook his head slowly. "Do you know how rare that is? Most passengers don't even look at me, Maggie. I'm just the driver. But you saw me. You saw me, so I made sure to see you too." We pulled up to my townhouse on Moss Street. In the morning light, it looked ordinary, peaceful, but I knew I'd never feel quite the same way about it again. 2 houses down, police tape cordoned off the gray-sided house with the blue Honda in the driveway. "Maggie," Derek said as I gathered my things, "I want you to have my personal number. Not the transit authorities, my actual cell phone. You call me any time, day or night, if you need anything. Anything at all." I took the card he handed me. "I will. And Derek, thank you. Thank you for everything." "Thank you," he replied, and I saw his eyes were wet too, for reminding me why I get up in the morning, for reminding me that the small things matter. The police investigation took weeks. They uncovered the full scope of Victor Pratt's operation, which wasn't even his real name. He was actually Douglas Fenton from Ontario, with a criminal record for fraud going back 20 years. He and his partner Carol Singh had been running their scheme for 3 years, moving from city to city across Canada, targeting vulnerable seniors in upscale neighborhoods. The documents he'd stolen from my house that night included everything he needed to steal my identity and drain my accounts. If Derek hadn't been watching, if he hadn't recorded those drunken phone calls, I would have walked into that Saturday meeting and handed him the last pieces of the puzzle. The police estimated I would have lost over $400,000, the equity in my home, my pension, everything Harold and I had worked for over 40 years. I testified at the trial. Derek testified too, his detailed logs and recordings becoming key evidence. The prosecutor called him the most thorough civilian witness I've ever worked with. Fenton and Singh were sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. The judge called their crimes predatory, calculated, and utterly devoid of conscience. Through it all, Derek kept driving his bus route. But now, when I got on, I sat in the front seat near his driver's partition, and we were no longer just driver and passenger. We were friends, bonded by circumstance and the choices we'd both made to show up for another human being. 6 months after the arrests, Derek's phone rang during one of our Sunday dinners at my house. I'd started cooking for him every week, partly because I missed cooking for someone, and partly because his face, when he tasted my roast chicken, made all the effort worthwhile. He stepped into the hallway to take the call. When he came back, his eyes were red. "That was Malcolm," he said, his voice breaking. "My son. He saw a news story about the trial, about what I did. He wants to come visit. He wants to bring his wife." Derek sat down heavily. "I'm going to be a grandfather, Maggie. Malcolm and his wife are expecting a baby in the spring, and he wants me to be part of the child's life." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "He said he'd been thinking about calling for years but didn't know how to start," Derek continued. "He said when he read about me paying attention, about me watching over a stranger because I couldn't watch over my own mother, he couldn't finish. 'You didn't fail your mother,' I said firmly. 'You honored her memory. You became the person she raised you to be.'" Malcolm and his wife Sarah visited that March, just as the cherry blossoms were beginning to bloom along the streets of Victoria. I met them for dinner at my townhouse, this makeshift family we were building from shared trauma and unexpected grace. "Thank you for taking care of my dad," Malcolm said to me quietly while Derek was showing Sarah my garden. He told me about the tea, the cookies, the conversations. He said you made him feel like he mattered when he'd forgotten how that felt. "He saved my life," I replied. "You saved each other." Malcolm smiled, and I could see Derek in his eyes. That's what people do when they really see each other, isn't it? My sister Linda finally came to visit that summer. She met Derek, met Malcolm and Sarah, met the tiny baby girl they'd named Grace after Derek's mother. She watched this unlikely family I'd gathered around me and shook her head in wonder. "Harold would have loved this," she said. "You know that, right? He always said you had a gift for bringing people together." I thought about that a lot. About Harold, about the life we'd built, about the unexpected path his death had set me on. If the pension had been bigger, I wouldn't have needed a job. If I'd kept taking cabs instead of the bus, I never would have met Derek. If I hadn't brought him tea on a cold October night, he might not have been paying such close attention when it mattered most. "The threads that hold the world together," his mother had said. "Small kindnesses." I'm 67 now, still working part-time at the Fairfield Branch Library, still living in my townhouse on Moss Street, but I'm not lonely anymore. Derek and I have dinner every Sunday. Malcolm and Sarah bring little Grace to visit every few months. They call me Auntie Maggie, which makes me smile every single time. Last month, a new volunteer started at the library. A woman about my age, recently widowed, with that same shell-shocked look I remember seeing in my own mirror a year ago. She was struggling with the computer system, her eyes filling with frustrated tears. So I brought her tea on her second day, sat with her during break, told her it would get easier. "Thank you," she whispered, looking at me with such gratitude. "You have no idea how much this means, but I do. I know exactly what small kindnesses can mean. I know how a moment of seeing someone, really seeing them, can change the trajectory of a life. Because I gave a bus driver tea and conversation, he was paying attention the night it mattered most. And because he was paying attention, we both found our way back to living. Both found our way to becoming people who mattered to each other. Looking back, I realized the police caught the criminals, but they didn't save me. Derek saved me. And I'd like to think I saved him too, in a different way. We saved each other simply by being kind, by paying attention, by refusing to let another human being disappear into the background of our busy lives. There's a lesson in that, I think. We live in a world that often feels too big, too fast, too complicated. We're surrounded by strangers every day, on buses and in grocery stores and on our own streets. Most of them we never really see. They're just background noise in the story of our lives. But what if we did see them? What if we took 2 minutes to ask someone about their day, to learn their name, to treat them like they mattered? You might be surprised what happens. You might find a friend. You might find a family. You might find someone who's been waiting their whole life to be seen. Or you might find someone who's paying attention when nobody else is. Someone who notices the danger you can't see. Someone who cares enough to speak up, to get involved, to be the guardian angel you didn't know you needed. Derek told me once that his mother believed every person we meet is fighting a battle we know nothing about. She was right. The bus driver who seems tired might be grieving a mother he couldn't save. The widow who brings you tea might be desperately seeking connection after losing her entire world. The helpful neighbor might be a predator in disguise. We can't always know which is which, but we can choose kindness anyway. We can choose to see people. We can choose to pay attention. Be kind to the stranger who serves you coffee. Be kind to the driver who takes you home. Be kind to the elderly neighbor who seems a little lost, not because you expect something in return, not because kindness always leads to happy endings, but because in a world full of people trying to take advantage of each other, every small act of genuine human connection is a tiny rebellion. Every moment of really seeing another person is a victory. You never know whose life you might save. You never know whose life might save yours. The threads that hold the world together, after all, are not made of money or power or status. They're made of moments. A cup of tea offered on a cold night, a name remembered, a shoulder squeezed in comfort, a question asked with genuine interest. Small kindnesses. They're the threads that held my world together when everything else was falling apart. And maybe, if we all wove a few more of them into our daily lives, we could hold the whole world together too. If you've made it this far, I want to leave you with one more thought. The fraud that almost destroyed my life targeted elderly people specifically because criminals know we're often isolated, often confused by technology, often too proud to ask for help. If you have an elderly parent, an elderly neighbor, an elderly friend, check on them. Really check on them. Ask about their finances, not to be nosy, but to be safe. Ask if anyone new has entered their life, anyone who seems a little too helpful, a little too interested. We live in a time when connection is easier than ever on the surface, and true connection is harder than ever to find. Don't let the people you love disappear into the background. See them, really see them. And if a stranger ever offers you kindness, accept it, pay it forward when you can, because you never know when that small thread might be the one that saves your life.